I told you we should have waited for your father and gone with him. Then we wouldn't have been stuck in the damn desert. John would have figured something out. I should have come with you. Now we're going to be lost here." In desperation, a tall blonde woman of about 45 named Susan stood nervously beside a stout, short man in a sun helmet digging under the hood of their foreign car. But Stephen didn't seem to share the lady's anxiety, or rather, he simply gave no sign of bothering her. Looking toward the mercilessly scorching Tunisian sun, the man replied, "Don't worry, Mom. We'll get cleaned up and hit the road. I'll still have time to show you the sunset over the desert. It is very beautiful in these parts. You know there was no point in waiting for Dad. If he meets his friend Richard in town, it'll take a long time. Until they've drunk the entire supply of coffee, he won't show up at the hotel." The woman only hummed and replied, "What a friend of youth! Meeting after all these years. He could at least show some respect and invite us to stay at his house." "Well, I think Richard's 4 wives would object to such a neighborhood. There's already no room for a 5th, Stephen replied with a chuckle. Luckily, Susan didn't hear his last words, because at that moment she was startled by a huge lizard that suddenly jumped out from behind a huge rock. She only heard her name, but even that was enough to make the tanned woman extremely upset. "Call me Mom. I've told you that so many times already." "I can't stand being called stepmom," she said, pouting her Botox-infused lips capriciously. "Whatever you say, Mom. I'm sorry I forgot." Stephen began to remember again how his stepmother had shown up unexpectedly at their house. His father, David, a hereditary plastic surgeon, had completely lost his head to this woman after 30 years of marriage, pointing his biological mother Margaret to the door of their family nest. Of course, an intruder like her, like a hornet entering a hive and wanting fresh honey, could hardly please anyone but the one who had invited her into their home. To their dismay, nothing could be done about the car. Fortunately, twilight comes quickly in the desert, and soon the scorching sun began to retreat to the west. A cool breeze from the Mediterranean Sea suddenly blew, which cooled their bodies and gave them hope for salvation. Sitting down next to his stepmother and blissfully stretching his tired legs, Stephen pointed his hand to the huge orange ball on the horizon and ironically remarked, "Even though we didn't get there, I kept my promise. Look, Mom, what a lovely sunset. You certainly wouldn't have seen such a sight from the hotel window." Susan, even teary-eyed, though with her beautiful eyes narrowed from dehydration, looked up at the life-giving luminary. Only by the looks of it tomorrow, unless help came, the sun would roast them like lambs on a spit. How romantic is that? "I just wish I could be there for your father in times of need," she said. "Why would we need a father when we have someone like me around?" Stephen replied, "You have to take everything from life, even if there isn't much left. That's my motto." "I always get my way in the end," said Stephen, and suddenly moved closer to his stepmother. Without giving the woman a second thought, he put his arms around her, trying to comfort her. But the blonde took his words too literally. "I want to feel love and affection one last time." She literally sunk a kiss into her stepson's parched lips and lowered him to the sand. For several hours they lounged under the light of the moon and stars. But suddenly, quite unexpectedly, it was much brighter than the dim moon. The bright beam of the lantern struck Susan's face. She even shrieked in surprise, jumping away from Stephen when she saw 2 men on camels. Help had finally arrived, but unfortunately not in time. In the riders, the woman recognized her husband and his friend Richard. New excuses were invented by the unfaithful wife, retreating in the face of her husband's formidable lessons. Having received a fair portion of scolding right on the spot, Susan ran through the desert faster than a deer, howling like a real hyena. But the men did not leave her in the sands. They drove her back to the hotel, but of course she had to get to her homeland on her own.